Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Janet Dugdale. I'm the Director of the Museum of Liverpool and the Interim Director of the Merseyside Maritime Museum here at National Museums Liverpool. It's absolutely fantastic to welcome you all to Liverpool on such a sparklingly sunny day. I think you brought the weather with you as you started to arrive yesterday. I have to tell you, it's not always like this down here on the pier head. Well, we're in Liverpool. A fantastic world city. There are a number of things going on this weekend as well as this conference, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about. We're in the Museum of Liverpool, which opened in 2011, right in the centre of Liverpool's World Heritage Site. This weekend, we have an International River Festival, and one of our funders wanted us to have the conference this weekend so that you could sort of see the busyness of Liverpool as well. And when we leave this evening, there is free music out on the pier head. There's a brochure over there for you to look at, and there are some more on the information desk. It's also, in June and July, the International Festival of Business. There are many things happening across the city to try and improve economic development, both for Liverpool and the North West. And one of our funders was the cultural programme for the International Festival of Business. So thank you to them. Great that they supported what we wanted to do here today and tomorrow with the Unstraight Museum conference. Last night I opened a dazzle ship, which is just one of the largest objects in our collection and just out here. So if you get time over the next 2 days, it's open from 10 till 5. It's a big art commission as part of the First World War commemorations and quite an unusual thing to do. So it's been quite an interesting few days for us. Just a little bit about National Museums Liverpool. We are a group of 8 museums and galleries. We're funded directly by the government through grant in aid. We're the only national museums service that is totally headquartered outside of London, so here in a big regional city. Very value organisation, and hopefully that will become apparent as you sort of hear about our work over the next couple of days, which leads us to, I think, do interesting and important work and always kind of keep pushing ourselves to think differently about what museums are and who they're for. We have a strong belief in social justice, and we set up last year an international alliance called the Social Justice Alliance for Museums, working with museum partners across the globe and other cultural organisations, because we feel that together we can achieve a lot more. And one of the first cultural organisations to say they wanted to be part of that was Homotopia and Gary Everett. So if you're interested in joining us, Jam free. It's just about networking. It's about people getting together across the globe through social media. There's some information over here, signing up sheet, so I hope that you're interested in that. It'd be great if you all were. The Museum of Liverpool opened almost 3 years ago, and we've had about 2.7 million visitors. So as a city history museum, it's made quite an impact on how we think about Liverpool and how we think about Liverpool's stories. And having exhibitions and shows like April Ashley, Portrait of a Lady, have absolutely been integral to the success of the museum so far. As an organisation, we've worked with Homotopia for a number of years, and I think that you will all sort of hear over the next couple of days how vital it is for all institutions, cultural institutions, LGBTQ organisations and individuals to work together. We couldn't have achieved any of the work that you'll hear about this afternoon without working with Homotopia. I think by coming together we've all grown stronger, and the impact of voice and the ability to campaign or set stories in context is really significant. So communication is key. And Lou and Bev from Homotopia have asked me to say, if everyone likes tweeting, please tweet. And there's a hashtag, which is hashtag Unstraight Conference. No hyphen in the Unstraight, all one word. And we're going to be live streaming the event. And if anyone wants to pass on the details to anyone who couldn't make it, you need to go to www.homotopia.net. Tim at the back is going to be live streaming for us today. The conference is funded really in 2 ways as well as your delegate fees. The first was last year, the Museum of Liverpool received the Council of Europe Museum Prize for 2013, and that prize money was all about the human rights work that we do. So we wanted to do something special with it. So when Homotopia came up with the idea for this symposium and conference, it was absolutely, I felt, the right thing that we should put our prize money towards making sure that we could have international speakers and a really strong speaker list to make this an important event. So that was one way we funded it, and the other then was through the International Festival Business Cultural Programme. Just final thing from me is some housekeeping. If the fire alarm does go off, it is real. From this floor of the museum, we can all exit to atmosphere. There are fire exits through here, and they take us down ramps. So if we're in this room, we can get out straight away. There are staff in here who will help with that. If you're anywhere else in the museum, our visitor services assistants will help you get out. If you're a wheelchair user, on our second floor of our museum, we have dedicated fire lifts, and all the staff will help you get out of the museum. And then what we ask you to do is to congregate in front of the building, which is just behind us. So when you go, if you end up going out of the main museum door, the Powerlicious building is just behind and on the city side, and then we'll get everyone back in as soon as we can. Tonight there's a reception and exhibition opening. This floor of the museum will stay open, but if you want to see other parts of the museum, please ask me or us or some of the other museum staff, and we'll try and show you things individually. And there will be an opportunity to have a look around the museum tomorrow. So that's it from me. We've got a very packed programme, and we're really interested to hear not just the presentations and the workshops, but all your voices and views as we progress over the next couple of days. And the last thing for me to do is to welcome someone who probably most of you know or will know of, Gary Everett from Homotopia.
Thank you, Janet. I'll be very brief because I'll talk more about the Homotopia later in my presentation. The Unstraight Museum, I have to thank the Unstraight Museum, the real one in Sweden, because I went there with an exhibition of Tom of Finland in 2012, and I met the organisers, and I was very inspired, and I did write to them, and I said, can I borrow your title for this conference? And they said yes, and they're one of our key speakers, so I'd like to thank them for allowing us to use their title. In the 10 years I've been working for Homotopia, the abuse of human rights for gay, lesbian, trans people has deteriorated. It hasn't got better, it's got worse. And that's one of the reasons I'm motivated to do what I do, and Bev and Lou, who work with Homotopia, for Homotopia, are also the same and committed to this sort of work. This symposium means a lot to us. We're tiny. The relationship with the museum has been for me, very impressive and very meaningful. But politicians, priests, policemen around the world think they can turn out the lights and turn back the clock. Well, they can't, and we won't let them, because museums and art galleries and people who work in archives are in a unique position to challenge the orthodoxy and the hate and the insidious culture that's affecting a lot of people around the world who are gay or lesbian or trans or bisexual. We can't let that carry on. We must always be vigilant and always be as unstraight as we can. Thank you for coming. It's a real pleasure to be here today, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Hello, I'm Lou Muddle from Homotopia, and I would like to invite Nicholas Hasselquist, I knew I'd get it wrong, Nick, from the Unstraight Museum in Sweden, to open the conference with the first presentation.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to put on my clock here first, so I know what I'm doing. All right. Before I start, I assume that all of you have had an email sent, not from me, but from Lou, I guess, about bringing an object. I've gotten a lot of mails back from people that are bringing objects. Great. If you have not brought an object for the workshop later, please try to think of a story, a personal story. It says a little bit here about what you can if most of you guys don't have anything, it's going to be a boring workshop. So try to think of something. We still have a few hours left until the workshop is on. But let's start. So my name is Nicholas Hasselqvist, and I am from the Unstraight Museum, the museum, not the seminars. And we're a Swedish NGO. We work both as activists and as a museum at the same time, and we work with both activists and museums. I'm not going to go into exactly what we do. That's if you want to, you can ask me. I'm here for all these days. We can talk about it later. I'm going to talk about more interesting and fun and not so fun things. We are a member of the ICOM, and we focus on LGBTQ stories, both internationally and in Sweden. We started in 2007. And we collect all these stories from the local LGBT community from wherever we are when we do our exhibitions. I'll give you some examples of stories later. Now these stories, there are stories that are rarely being told at museums all over the world. As you know, the museums focus mostly on white, heterosexual, male stories for now. Hopefully it will be better in the future. And I guess it has to do with that museums don't really think it being relevant to talk about all different stories. But today I'm going to start to talk about Sweden. Since Sweden appears frequently as a leading country in terms of LGBTQ rights, I'm gonna do this. I would like to talk a little bit about my experience that I have, that I've had from working with the Unstraight Museum these years, because to me it isn't what it seems behind the scenes of this kind of pioneer country. Now, one of the most important things for the Unstraight Museum is to take a stand and to dare to be brave as a museum. Maybe even to take risks. For the part of the museum, I think it's about to stand up for what you believe is right and for those who are in need. It's important to use the power that you have and the power that you're given through having from representing a museum. So I'm going to talk to say a few words about Sweden and Swedish organizations and institutions and companies that takes advantage of the Swedish values and what Sweden kind of stands for. And in my opinion, that also gives them the responsibility to guard these values. I'm going to start to talk about, oh, it's pretty bright in here. I don't know how much you can see. But this is a gay man. He is from Nigeria, and he was about to be deported from Sweden a few months ago. According to this man, his boyfriend was killed in Nigeria when they were caught during a sex act. So the man applied for asylum in Sweden. Oh, this is 2 years ago. The Swedish Migration Board rejected the man's application, saying it was not credible. The decision was appealed to the Migration Court, and they made a different judging. Sorry, here. Yeah, the court found that the man's story was credible, but they noted that there was probably some threat in his native village. But they also argued, I'm going to read this straight from my paper, the country information suggests that homosexual acts are tolerated in most parts of Nigeria as long as they are conducted discreetly and privately. So they suggest that he could move to a different part of Nigeria and live discreetly there. But can you really require someone to hide yourself and to live hidden to avoid persecution based on sexual orientation? The Nigerian president, Goodluck Jonathan, He recently signed a law saying that you can get 14 years in prison if a homosexual marries someone of the same sex, and it's the same penalty if you are having a same-sex relationship. So the Swedish immigration authorities took him to the Nigerian embassy, and they tried to obtain travel documents and everything, but in the last minute, and this is a few months ago, this guy was stopped from being deported due to the help of a Swedish lawyer working at something called RFSL. It's a Swedish NGO working with LGBT rights. So it was just in time before he left. So these reports that the Migration Board use, where do they come from? And it is from the Swedish embassies. So the statement that someone can live discreetly in Nigeria comes from the Swedish embassy. And last year, one of our co-workers that works at the Unstraight Museum met with a high representative from a Swedish embassy that works in a country that is known for discriminating against LGBT people. And our co-worker, who is kind of a bold person, just asked this representative what her responsibilities are. And her answer was that it was to support and facilitate for Swedish companies to establish in the country. This is her main goal. Now, since Sweden is known for standing out for human rights and sustainability, our co-worker asked her what the embassy demands, what demands the embassy put on the companies to help them. And she said that it's not possible for them to take a risk that the companies would weaken their position due to political statements. So to challenge a homophobe or racist culture through taking a stand in these issues is nothing that the Swedish embassies do. This is nothing that they do if it can hurt the image of the company. And these are persons that are representing Sweden and the values that we are supposed to stand for and that we are talking a lot about internationally. And of course, I have to mention IKEA. This is one rich company. I don't have my figures here, but they made a hell of a lot of money. And they are being helped a lot by the Swedish embassies all around the world to establish. I don't know if you heard last year, I think it was May last year, that they, in Russia, they deleted a page from their family catalog from, it was two lesbian, it was an, I don't know if it was a, it was just a commercial thing there about two lesbian girls that lived together, and they deleted that from their Russian catalog, which is obviously not okay since they are still profiting on the Swedish kind of values and everything. I also have to talk a little bit about Sochi and the Olympics that took place there earlier this year. Now, due to the contradictory message that the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, and the Russian politicians were sending out regarding the situation for LGBT people, there is a newspaper called Gay Star News, and they asked the IOC what they intend to do to ensure that LGBT people in Russia have a visible and a secure presence in Sochi. And the IOC wrote this. The Olympics is not a venue for political statements, and anyone who steps out of line may be punished not only by the Russian government, but by the Olympics official as well. So LGBT organizations have asked activists and athletes to wear rainbow pins, but the IOC also called this propaganda, and that has been forbidden for 50 years. I'm sure a lot of you guys knows this already. They wrote this: no kind of demonstration or political, religious, or racial propaganda is permitted in any Olympic site, venues, or other areas. So this newspaper, again, they asked the IOC if they will create a safe space for LGBT people. And they answered like this. Regarding your suggestion, the IOC has a clear rule laid out in the Olympic Charter. It's rule number 50, which states that the venues of the Olympic Games are not a place for proactive political or religious demonstration. This rule has been in place for many years and applied when necessary. I, on the other hand, argue that it is a very clear political stand to be against human rights, as they are doing. This is politics on a very high level. So back to Sweden again. This is the Swedish Olympic Committee, and these are the main sponsors of the Swedish Olympic Committee this year. ATG is a lottery company, I guess you can call it. Nordea is a Swedish bank, and Vattenfall is one of, I think it's one of Europe's biggest power companies. What connects all of them is that they are partially or completely owned by the Swedish government. I'm not sure about ATG. Do you guys know it? Yeah. And they have, all of them, well, except ATG, at several times been bailed out by the Swedish government, by Swedish tax money. If you search the Swedish Olympic Committee's website for LGBTQ or any related words, you find zero, absolutely no hits whatsoever. So, a question I would ask myself is, how would it be if we were not talking about LGBTQ people? What would happen if we were talking about non-white people, about Jewish people? Would this still be as accepted in the mainstream as it is now? This does not mean that nothing is done, obviously. There is a lot of people that are working with these issues. A lot of us are sitting right here, right now. And we at the Unstraight Museum are working with a lot of these people, both in Sweden and internationally. There's a way to go, and as you said, Gary, things are worse now than it was in some areas than it was a while back. So this is kind of the situation in Sweden, and this is why we cannot lean back, why we cannot, why we still have to take an active stand, and this is why museums also have to take an active stand to represent all people, not just the white, heterosexual, male persons. So, now I told you a little bit what I think is wrong with the world and with Sweden, and we're going to watch a little film, pure commercially. And I want to talk a little bit about our methods, what we do. We have a website, which is our kind of base, where we collect these stories that I'm talking about. And we're giving them the space that they deserve. And it's to give LGBTQ persons a voice. And one of our major goals is also to inspire museums to work with these issues and help them out with how you can work. So let's watch this this film first of all.
There are over 15,000 museums in Europe and about 55,000 worldwide. 312 of them are about Elvis Presley, 12 are about lunchboxes, 7 about toilets. Only 2 of them are unstraight. The European database collects over 15 million items from European museums. If you search the database, you'll find 68 chewing gums and 8,215 toilets, but no unstraight items whatsoever. Why is that? Is it because the museums are having a really hard time defining what's unstraight? Could this handkerchief be unstraight? Hell yeah. Could Jesus be unstraight? Well, apparently. What about this toilet? Or this chewing gum? You tell us. Be a part of defining unstraight at www.unstraight.org.
So to us, it's really important that it's not us who are defining what is or who is unstraight. It's everyone in the world that decides for themselves who they are and what they are. So let's talk a little bit about the stories. I thought the absolute best way for you to understand what we're doing is to just for you to sit back and relax and enjoy these kind of interesting things, and I will just talk you through it. So first of all, we have a key that is, now we don't have any of these objects, we just have the stories on our sites. It's important for, we don't have a physical museum, it's all digital, and when we do exhibitions, we do this in collaboration with museums. So we borrow objects at times, but we never have them in our possession. So this is a key. You can read for yourself what it's about. I think it's very beautiful. It's this person from Zimbabwe who, it's a trans person who by accident brought this key with her or him from this bungalow, and it represents a time when this person can feel like him or herself without having prejudice thrown at her or him all the time. I'm sorry, my ignorance. Is there a word in English for him or her or a third gender? Sorry?
Take the plural, themselves or
them. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. This person sent in this picture and wrote this text at our website themselves. Our website right now is not very up to date, but in a week or two we're having a new website. So please check it out in a while. Now these are two things that you rarely see next to each other. It's a Bible and a cock ring. It's an elderly gay guy who gave this to us. This is actually in our possession. He never really thought that they had a meaning in his life. Both of them were kind of useless for him. He did his confirmation in Sweden, and he never felt welcome in the Christian community, so we never really used the Bible. And the cock ring was, I think this is when he just came out and he was kind of exploring his sexuality, and he bought a cock ring that was way too big for him, unfortunately. So he was happy when he heard about the Unstraight Museum, because then these items found a new value and a new their story got a new meaning. Now we also cooperate with this is a cooperation we've done with this region of Stockholm, I guess. We've been documenting places in the Stockholm area. And this is the first time in the criminal records that you can find lesbianism or a lesbian person being mentioned. It was a lesbian embroilment going on. It was a kind of triangular sexual, what do you call it, like an infidelity thing. And the police arrived and tried to sort it out. And this is when? Oh, when is this? No, I don't remember. I'm sure it says somewhere, but I forgot to. I kind of shorted down the text, and now I realized that I don't know. Yeah, thank you. This is also, I'm sorry you can't see this very well, maybe. This is a skeleton. We got this from the Museum of History in Stockholm. This is a skeleton from about 9,000 years ago. They found this in the 30s together with some tools laying next to it. And at the 30s, at the time, they thought that it was a male person, due to that they had, or the person had tools next to it. But later on in the 70s, they tried to examine it, and they looked at the pelvis, and they took some DNA samples, and they realized it was a girl or a female. And it doesn't say so much about what happened 9,000 years ago, but it says a lot about the 30s and how you assumed things back then, and about the 70s and the present, how you redefine things. So this is also a museum that has put this on our website. Let me see where we are time-wise. Oh, we have lots of time left. Wonderful. This is actually one of my favorite objects. This is also a gay person, a male that did this little Matchbox car. To him, it just represents a time in his life when he was 8 years old, and he was in a lot of troubles. He was kind of trying to realize who he was, and he made this little car. He kissed a guy apparently really, like fiercely on the cheek, and it was very emotional for him. And he didn't know what that meant or why he did that. He realized that he was gay. So this car has nothing to do with that actual incident. It's just something that represents something to him, which I think is very, very beautiful. This is also something that we actually have ourselves. We got this from the museum of the Technic Museum, something like this, yeah, in Stockholm. It's a tuner that they used at the Stockholm Gay Radio. This is in the 70s, yeah. And the medium of radio is still very, very used. Maybe not as much in the West. We have podcasts and everything, but in a lot of places where we go, regimes are blocking the internet, or so they're blocking podcasts, or they're blocking sites where you can find other gay people. So in the 70s, people used the gay radio to listen. They had headphones, so no one would know what they were listening at, and that is still the case at a lot of places around the world where you can't. Maybe you don't even have internet access. This is from a queer Sagub. It's a festival. We were doing something there, and when was this? A couple of years ago. 3 years ago, yeah. And it's about that homophobes are humans too. Let's not forget about that. And this is our last object that I'm going to show you right now. I would like to finish with this. This is some dance skins of fishnet stockings from a drag artist in Stockholm. And I'd like to say that it's still so important. The drag community and the trans community is still fighting a really harsh battle with the rest of the world. And they have always been in the front lines since the what do you call it? The riots. Help me out here. Thank you, Stonewall. And even today, when you are trying to log on to the internet here at this museum, you still have to decide male or female when you try to register. Just a little heads up, something you can think about for the future, maybe. So I'm just going to show you a little bit how an exhibition could look like when we're out in the world and doing exhibitions. This is from Serbia. Objects and the short little stories next to it in necessary languages. It can be really, really cheap to do this. It can go really fast. You don't need to do this during a lot of months and curate everything. It's really easy to just collect the objects, have the stories, and put them on little podiums like this. At this specific exhibition, we also had a photo exhibition. Do you know what the artist is, or who the artist is here? No. But as you can see, this is very, very simple, very cheap, and very effective. People you can see that they're very touched by this. You can kind of see the person and their experiences when you see these objects and the stories. This is from Tirana. Okay, good. And this is from St. Petersburg, I think. Yeah. So these are the places that we have been. As you can see, we focused on the Eastern Europe for until now. And this is a new project that we're doing right now. It's called Unstraight Perspectives. And we are right now in Hanoi doing a kind of an education education program together with activists, with museum staff, and with people from the university becoming curators and museum professionals in the future, to talk about how you can work with the community and with what do you call it? I'm losing words today a lot. Well, yeah, working with the community and how to collect stories from the community and work in this way. And so these are also places we're going to this and next year, and hopefully we're actually going not only to Myanmar or Burma. We are traveling the whole region around there. We're going to Laos and Cambodia as well, kind of to tour the smaller villages where it's really difficult to find other LGBTQ persons. There is an organization in the north of Sweden called Quering Sapmi, which are they are working with queer person in the Sami community. This has been very controversial and very interesting. I met her, one of the persons working there in Hanoi, and she has a method of how to be able to work with how to find people in a community that it's never been present, a queer kind of context before. So it would be a challenge to go there and to see, you know, all these smaller villages and find people there and see how it is to live as an LGBT person there, LGBTQ person. Now, before we finish, I want to talk a little bit about our database and how it works. It's really interesting, and it looks a little boring, but to me it's poetry actually. You have the private users that I showed you, that they add things to our website, the black little box here. You can have museums that also can put things directly on our website. You see the little rainbow colored things that are more LGBTQ related. And you can search this from our website. We are planning on doing, hopefully, an app, so you can tag while you find something Unstraight in town, and you geo-tag it, and you have. So it will also end up on our web, but it's also very like site-specific where you are at. And our hope is that this can be used for research sometime as well in the future. Now you have also, each museums, they have different databases obviously, and for now you can follow the black line going to something called K-samsök, which is the Swedish version of Europeana, and for you not coming from Europe, this is a database collecting all materials from all the museums, from all the databases. So you can search for anything that is in any museum in Europe that is connected to ICOM, I think, roughly more or less like that. So all the museum databases are connected to this K-samsök, and we are creating kind of a little hashtag that they can put on there, like Unstraight, and that would send the object directly to our website as well. And all our objects are going to K-samsök already with the hashtag Unstraight. And obviously it's also going to Europeana then. So the poetry in this is that if you, for example, would search at mysterious smile in Europeana, you would end up with maybe these two objects, and they are perfectly equal. There is nothing, they're just listed next to each other. Mona Lisa and these lovely people that are out. I think this is in the 60s. It's the first time that they're coming out officially and going at a dinner this is a transgendered community back then, and this is the first time they had their dinner out in public at a restaurant. So, thank you. If you have any questions, this is where you can find me. If you have any questions right now, there is still some time, and I will gladly answer anything. Lovely. We have a question here.
All right. Actually, what I want to propose and ask of you is, how are you self-censoring? Because what I experience is that there's a censorship here. And what we're wanting is we're wanting to not be censored. At least it's my interpretation. And yet I feel like there's a lot of censorship. I feel like the sexuality is missing, and that I think the thing that defines us is our sexuality. And so actually I'm from the Tom of Finland Foundation, and so we have had 30 years of being of having, and Tom of Finland as an artist had over 50 years of fighting censorship in regards to taking the sexuality out of art, out of presentation. And so I think the thing that actually we have to actually take a look at is how are we doing that on ourselves?
Yes. We are actually not censoring anything at all. This is one of our main things. That is why we also say that it's you that define what is unstraight. We have everything. Anyone can put out anything, and we are not censoring it. There is no filter going through us before we put it up. It's directly, it goes up there. So anyone is free to put up anything they want. We have also talked about this. What happens if someone put up something transphobic or homophobic, and as soon as it's not, or if it's not hurting anyone, I also suppose it says something about our time and where we are right now. So we haven't really gotten to that point where we have had to face that someone is putting up something racist or homophobic or transphobic. But so yeah, there is absolutely no censorship, and that is one of the bigger parts of why we do what we do. We don't believe in that should be censored. We are not the one to define what is unstraight. That is all of you guys' job to do that. Yeah.
Hi, just a simple question. How, obviously you've gone to Russia, and how was that?
How it is?
Yeah.
Well, it's not as difficult as you might think, actually. We collaborate with a really nice organization, or a good organization in St. Petersburg called All Out, is it? Coming Out, sorry, Coming Out. And wherever we go all around the world, we tend to, we can't be expert of the area. We need to listen to the activists working there. We use their expertise. How far can we go? How far would we go? What do they need? What is relevant for them? So in Russia, I would say we had, we've been there a couple of times, and last year, this fall, we had called a legislation about obviously about the legal system and how it works, how they work, and how you can work around it. We had a very interesting talk. We invited a police officer from the gay police in Sweden, and we found actually 4 LGBT, no, not T, LGB persons working in the police force. They were obviously there. There was a camera, what do you call it? Like no one could take photos or anything. And we had a debate to talk about how is it to work as a police officer? How is it to be both gay and a policeman? And it was really interesting. It kind of diversed your thoughts of the police force there and how people there are really thinking about, because how do we enforce these laws? They're written very not clear. So it's really, really interesting. If you have a chance, you should go to this festival sometimes. It's really,
fantastic.
Really good.
And are you documenting those experiences when you go to places? There's obviously a lot of things happening, like you're just telling us now. Are you blogging, or are you? No,
we could get better at documenting what we do.
Just, okay,
as could everyone, obviously. But yeah, I don't think we're documenting enough, actually. But what we're trying to do is that wherever we go, wherever we find stories, we try to get them on our web, so at least we have the stories safe. And since I'm actually the only one working at the museum as to get paid, we have a board, about 10 people, and they are working, but they have their real jobs as well. So they go a lot, like Lena here, goes a lot around the world to try to do this as well.
Thank you. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jamie. I'm from the Queer Media Festival in Manchester, and some of the museums have got in touch with me about wanting submissions of LGBT digital content, and I asked them what sort of content do we want in an activist sense, and they didn't know. So museums asking me for digital content, but they don't know what they want me to provide, and I don't know what to give them. So what's your advice on how do you create digital content?
Oh, it's kind of difficult, but still, if it's just digital content you want, I guess you could do something like this. You could, we did at the Pride Festival in Stockholm. This was 2 years ago, I think. Yeah. To create digital content, we also did a physical exhibition that went on during all the Pride week. So we had in our office, we just asked people to come there. And to bring their objects, and we displayed them with us that week, and we also collected it digitally. And this was a great way to activate the community, to make them feel a part of it, and to intervene. I'm not sure if that was an answer to your question.
I was asking, one point was, what sort of things do you look for in digital content? Because for me, in my mind, when you're thinking of museums, you're thinking of a physical object. But how do you archive or curate an exhibition around something that's digital and nearly electronic? What sort of things would people be looking for?
Well, I think it's better I mean, the objects are, for us, the objects are just a mean to get the story. It's the object itself is kind of worthless, but the story around it makes it relevant. So to look for the stories rather than, I think, a good way to go about it, because that's really, at some museums when you go there, it's not relevant if you don't have the background, if you don't know the personal stories around it. I'm also a teacher, so I'm kind of, the didactic or the pedagogic way to go through to understand really is, to me, relevant to have the personal story around it. Yeah.
Guy Birch. I'm here as an artist myself, but also I was involved with Brixton Art Gallery, which was the first lesbian and gay art show in this country in 1983, and also slightly related to Dirk, the Bill Ward archive. We have an artist here called Bill Ward who was as well known as Tom was. I have 500 drawings. Now, a digital archive is extremely good. I mean, I love what you're doing, but I wonder, is it a collecting tool as well? Because for those of us who are trying to find homes for things, and especially, as Dirk says, when they're very explicit, sometimes it's very, very difficult. So I wondered if your archive on the net, where people see something and they're in the country concerned, and maybe it's a museum who are looking to collect things or looking to contact and make contacts. Do you envisage that at all?
I'm going to let Maya-Lena talk a little bit about this.
I'll try to explain to you. I'm Maya-Lena. I've been working with the web page since 2008, I think. So some of the objects that we have on the web page you can find in my home. Because we always say to people, we don't want any objects, we don't want them, but people tend to give us things anyway. So I have a lot of things from Skopje and from St. Petersburg, for example. But what we do, if you find something on the web page that you might want to do in an exhibition, we can connect you with the person who actually have got the object.
Sorry, Guy, because we're live, so we don't want to lose anything.
I think part of the problem is, as you talked about, in countries where it's very difficult to connect and they can interrupt the internet, so you would not be available there. It is important to remember that collecting the objects so that they're there for future generations, because of course politics change in countries, and if museums don't have the things in their collections, then future generations of researchers are not going to spot that there's a story. And those collections need to identify in their short catalogue I mean, I'm sure you know all about this, but for instance, we did a project with the Tate Gallery, putting some of the lesbian and gay stuff from the Brixton Collective into their collection, and we found that their catalogue hardly mentions lesbian and gay at all. It starts to now because we pointed it out to them.
Yeah.
But again, you've got to have physical collections available as well. So I just wondered whether, you know, that was something you were actively going to sort of encourage museums to approach you and say.
Yes, in Sweden, that is we collaborate with a lot of huge institutions in Sweden, and we're helping them to kind of to find ways to go about to document and to bring in new collections. In this project that we're doing, the Unstraight Perspectives, which is 4 international exhibitions and 4 Swedish exhibitions. We're working with the Museum of History in Stockholm, the Museum of Work in Norrköping, the Museum of Malmö, and the Museum of World Culture in Gothenburg. And this project is for them to either find new objects to their permanent collections, or to look at their existing exhibitions and collections and redefine objects that could be interpreted in a different way. So we're making them do the work, but we're there to help them and to find people that know about these things and that can help them in a good way. So that's a part of what we do. Since we're really small, it's I wish that we could be all over the place and do all this, because it's really, as you say, there is a lot of collections privately around the world that needs to be saved somehow. Let's keep talking about that, how we do that. Yeah?
Hi, Cheryl Morgan from Outstories Bristol. Just to come back to Jamie's question briefly, one thing that we did that was very effective was to have short sound bites in that we collected from an oral history. Sound bites, audio, that we collected from an oral history project we did. You know, it's one thing to have something up there saying, you know, I lost my job, I was thrown out by my family, I was beaten up, and so on. But to have somebody saying that in their own voice is a really powerful thing to put in an exhibit. But my question for you, Nick, is about history. We had a lot of trouble when we were putting together our exhibition in that there were people that we knew of from relatively recent past who seemed pretty obviously to be living in same-sex relationships, but we couldn't prove it. There was nothing specific from them that said so. And we had the problem of living relatives of those people kicking up a fuss if we had interpreted anything. So how do you deal with stuff from the past, given that the idea of homosexuality wasn't actually invented until the 19th century?
Well, I'm not really sure how we deal with that. So we haven't really come across that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Maya-Lena. Yet we have only had people giving their own personal stories, so we haven't really had to deal with what we are, if we are defining how another person is. I do not know how we would go about. Ja, just det. Kan du säga några ord om det?
The Royal Palace, what is it called? You know,
Yeah, the Royal Armoury, I guess.
They have done really good work with this, and I think that they have found stories from the 1600 and back, which they are developing now. They have made recently a very big exhibition about the Queen or King Christina of Sweden, and they have done research among other royalties and other famous people, and I think they have start to work with this. We are not like a museum in that sense, but they have used us as a source of coming and to do this. And the King Christina exhibition we toured in Albania.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, so then we actually did. I don't know if you know the story. There was a Swedish regent called Christina. She was born a female, but she she was called the King Christina. She was considered to be a lesbian or I don't know if transgender. Yeah. But it's difficult for us to say what she would like to have called herself. So I don't know really how we have done about that.
Sarah Wadju from the National Maritime Museum. Congratulations on your work, and I just wanted to ask you a bit more about your relationship with museums and archives, and some of the challenges about working with big, maybe national organisations that might be institutionally not as on message, and what if you could expand a bit more on the sort of the cultural politics. I get the feeling that most of the organisations you've worked with have kind of come to you, so perhaps it's been quite high up their agenda, but for within the museum sector, people like me who are sort of, trying to change things would be keen to work with small organisations, but I'm really aware that there's lots of difficulties and lots of pressure for those small organisations when they come up against these huge establishments, and, people have already touched on some of that. And I wondered if you could kind of share with us a bit more about your perspective and the challenges and what you think museums can do to better work with you.
Well, I think that one of the things that I hear all the time from the museums that we work with in Sweden is that they are really happy to work with someone. I mean, our big strength is that we are really small. We're an activist organization, and we're still a member of the ICOM, so we're kind of an institution as well. So this gives the museum, and we have always started to work with persons in museums that we know, like you, that they're interested in. They want to make it kind of, what do you call it? Like the ideas melt into the museum, and it's really the museums thinks it's good to cooperate with a small organization that can be very flexible. That can, we don't have the same priorities or musts that we must do as the museums. So that has been the way that we are going in there through key persons. I don't know. Do you want to say something else about this as well now? Yeah, that has always been how we start them, and then after a while we have worked up a great relationship, and then it's just moving on.
That's what I imagine, to be honest. But I think the danger with that institutionally is that queer individuals move on, and they take those networks with them. And so it's very important for museums to embed this in a more institutional way. And so to do that, just kind of making friends almost on an individual basis, despite trying to sort of throw that around the museum and embed that, I think is quite important for organisations like yourself to also kind of have something a little bit beyond that kind of individual relationship, and it's probably more for the museums to do that work than for yourselves as a small organisation. But that's just a comment.
No, but that has always been that's where we start with the individual person, and then we always, not always, but most of the time we are being able to expand. And if we have done some kind of cooperations at several times with the museum, even if this person moves on, we still have a network within the museum. So it has still been, we're still working with the same museums even if people have been moving around. So that's...
Hi, my name is Surat Kanan from the Rainbow Juice Oral History Project. Just first a little comment and then a sort of more concrete question. There were a lot of things that other people were saying that you touched on. I came across in our Rainbow Juice project, which launched this year. It's the first collection of Jewish LGBT history in the UK, and we've come across a lot of things like, for example, objects, the dilemma of which objects could you, acquire, and then is the person who actually has that memorabilia item because of certain memories, and then what to do with them once you acquire them. Like you said, we've got things floating around in our basement as well at the center. So I think it would be really interesting, because a lot of things, I think we're dealing with the same sort of questions. It would be great to have like a forum or something that perhaps we can take away from this conference to work together and kind of help each other, perhaps producing a toolkit. Connected to that, maybe you said it and I'm not quite sure, the remit, are you working the objects you acquire? You talked about a database. Is the remit Swedish? I mean,
What's a remit?
The demographic. I mean, would you acquire, say, objects? Say I have an object, and I tell you I have a story in an object, and I'm from the UK. Would you take it into your collection, or is it like a Swedish?
No, we are an international organization.
Okay.
Now, your object you will have to keep yourself, since we don't have. I mean, I'm just sitting at an office that I have a little desk, and I have to take my computer with me every day home, so we have nowhere to put it.
I mean, the story
it will
object.
go from your basement to my basement, but the story part we collected from all over the world, and we want more stories from around the world, because now we have it's most Swedish stories right now, so we're trying to expand and make it more international.
And last part of that question, funding-wise, would be really interesting for me to.
The funding. Yeah, we don't have what do you call it, like regular funding, like from year to year. We just have funding for each project that we do. So it's kind of, we don't know how the future looks like. But for now, we have funding until next year, and we have that from something called the Postcode Lottery. I think, yeah, it's. Do they have it here as well? Yeah. I think they're one of Europe's biggest contributors to the cultural sphere. I'm not sure. They tell me, at least, there. So we get money from there, and we get money. That's for the Swedish part of these exhibitions that we're doing now. And then we also get money from the Swedish Institute, which are paying us to do the international part. Before, we had also had money from the Swedish Institute. Has really been one of our main collaborators. But also from small Swedish places. We haven't got any money from abroad, I think. No. Yep.
I guess my question actually changes a little bit as we go on, because I've been dealing with what we're talking about for over 30 years. In that the Tamma Finland Foundation is coming up on its 30th anniversary, and it is always dealing and has always dealt with and continues to deal with, even though we're moving much further along, with the subject of what to do with materials, physical materials, and also how to interact with a global community. And the thing is, I've approached this years before. There is so much money within, and I use the term gay, homo culture. There is so much money that does not go to us. It goes to other museums, it goes to other sources, because there's not a sense of respectability or to something to do with self-esteem. And so what's happened is that money hasn't gone to an umbrella organization, which doesn't exist, that can take care of all of these different heritage issues to do with who we are. And so we have to do it little bits, little communities. And I really think that it's at a place where we're actually, we don't have as much of our own funding from our own community anymore. So now we are looking for trying to find monies from larger organizations or from our own ability to actually generate revenue. And so where I'm going with this is that I always thought that there would be a place where we could have every different organizational collection be able to be saved if there was a huge financial money pool where people, when they died, they would donate that money into that money pool. But they don't trust it, so they don't do it. And they end up donating money to the SPCA or, other good organizations, but not to save our heritage. And so I think that this conference can also be a place for us to actually think about how we can actually interact and how we can actually create a financial money pool that can actually save. I see collections being thrown away and destroyed or broken apart because there's nowhere to give them to. And so I think one of the things that we can talk about in discussion is what can we do with those objects? What can we do with those collections? And how can we actually save them? because we can do it. We just have to be resourceful.
Yeah, it's one of our. We really would like to be able to be an institution that is more like, what do you call it, permanentized? Is that a word? So that we can accept this. If we have just somewhere we can put the things, but because right now, if we say that, yeah, I can take care of it, and I do not know what will happen in 2 years, will we be able to? I mean, what would happen to the object? It's better if it stays with the person that owns it, since we can't promise anything. But yeah, we've been thinking about it, how we can move on, but we need to be more secure before we can do that.
Maybe it could be that everyone will keep their own objects, and you'll have a database where everyone take the responsibility for being a storage house.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of what we are now, when everybody can display their story at our website. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Helena from Liverpool Record Office in the city, and I've been working with Bev at Hometopia with the April Ashley project, and I think it became quite apparent quite early on that we had a huge gap in our collections from the LGBTQ community, and I have been trying to go some way to rectify that. And I think what I've been finding is I've been trying to contact organisations and saying, what do you have? Because you're not represented at all in a heritage sense in the archives. And I think there's been a surprise, oh, you're interested in what we have. You know, they didn't think it had an intrinsic sort of value for the future. And although me personally, I'm trying to change it, I agree from a point earlier, when people move on, will that just be lost? You know, because it's like, okay, there's a focus at the moment. Will there be a focus in 2 years' time, 3 years' time? So what I've been trying to do is actually change our collection policy, rewrite it so that it includes these archives from different community groups. So from an institutional level, people see that we are serious. It's not just something that one person's interested in. And but you know, mainly there's a trust element. People need to trust us. People need to trust that we are going to do the right thing with it. And really, all that I really want to see happening is that everyone is represented in these archives in the future.
I'm very conscious of the time, so I was going to take one last point for now, and then I'm sure we'll carry on the discussion over the course of the...
I went to an archiving alternative archives at the Whitechapel Art Gallery, and one of the big issues there with these sorts of archives is the trust thing. If you give things to an archive, you want to know that they will treat it in a way which is empathetic to what you have. And in going to somewhere like the Tate, the first step is to say, we invite you. But the second step is to know that once it's in the collection, it doesn't disappear and that the story is kept the same. So I think that's one of the important messages. Archives have got to be actively saying, we empathize, we will adapt in order to accommodate you. So if you want your collection labeled queer, gay, trans, whatever, we will do that, and not to say it has to fit into our system, a square peg that fits into a round hole.
Yes. It's actually, I'm also in some kind of work group together with this, the Kåsamsök, the Swedish version of Europeana, of how to change the databases of all the different museums. Because if they're going to start taking in stories, I mean, this is so strange to me, being fairly new to the museum world, that they don't have, like in their databases, they don't have a field to tell a story. They have fields for what kind of materials, how big is it, how heavy is it, and this is so irrelevant, not irrelevant, I'm sorry, but it's not really interesting. I mean, and so we're really working on how to help museums to find ways to be able to tell a story and to accept new ideas of how to collect things. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Nicholas very much and draw this session to a close. There's now a half-hour break, and then we'll come back into here again to work with Nicholas and Lena from Unstraight Museum. Workshop is going to take place back in this room at 11:30. Thank you.
Yeah.